Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to my June wrap up and favorites. I'm so excited. It was so hard to pick my favorites from June. And even though I had a little bit of a lighter reading month because I had some trips that I went on which were absolutely life-changing and I'll never forget them. I still read some very high quality books along with my worst book of the year. So it was a very interesting month and I'm very excited to talk about it with you. So we're gonna dive right into this. But first off, I'm super proud of my flat lay for June. Even though it's simple, I'm always proud of myself when I'm putting it together and it makes me happy. So we're gonna go ahead and dive in because I try to keep these ones a little more succinct, but the books that I have to talk about, I have a lot to gush about them. So it's time for us to dive in. So my stats for this month were, I read 42 books, which was tied with my other lowest month, which was February. But you know what? That's okay. Again, it's about quality over quantity. And I tell that to everybody when they wonder, how do I read as much as you? I mean, some months it happens and some months it's less. That's just how it goes. Which was 13,371 pages, which averaged out to 471 pages per day, counting by, I stopped at the 28th with that, so I take that pages divided by 28 days because I always film this a little bit early, so it can go up on time. The format of those books were, I read 24 ebooks, 13 audio. I had 9 advanced reader copies this month and 9 were physical. Just a reminder, I do double up sometimes my audio and physical books just because sometimes I like to read and listen along with. It's fun. The ratings of these books, I just realized I should scoot a little bit so there's more room. I always forget to do that. Is I had 1 DNF this month. I had 2 6-star books, 11 5-stars, 4 4.5 star, 16 4-star, 4 3.5 star, 3 3-star, and 1 1-star. I do not normally give 1-star books because I usually DNF way before we get to that point. But as you can tell, it was mostly a high quality month. Everything was pretty much centered above 3 stars, but because even a 3-star isn't a bad rating for me. But that 1-star, man. Okay, the main subgenres that I read were, not the main ones. I'm going to tell you the breakdown of all of them. I had 17 contemporaries, 7 fantasy, 7 dark romance, 5 historical, 2 paranormal, 3 erotic romance, and 1 dystopian. And then just a couple other things which I don't have a graphic for, but they're one of the stats that I track in my spreadsheet, is 31 of the books were part of a series or continuing of a series, and 11 were standalones, which is kind of cool. And then the most read tropes this month were, I had forced proximity, age gap, no surprise, small towns, enemies to lovers, BDSM or dynamic play, and Grumpy Sunshine. Those were kind of the main ones for me, which was cool. I did not realize how much forced proximity I read this month, but there was 20 books that could be considered that, which is crazy. So yeah, part of the reason for some of the lower stats, which I've shared, I have vlogs for both of these trips. The very beginning of the month, I was in Atlanta for the Romance Booktuber Retreat, which I have a vlog for. And then just this previous weekend, I went to Utah, Salt Lake City, and then the town where my best friend Crystal lives. And I didn't do a ton of reading on those trips, even though they were with book besties, because the people were more important. But we're going to go through now my 5 favorites, because I like to keep these fun. And one of these books I'm going to be talking about, I actually don't have in a weekly wrap up yet. because weeks 25 and 26, since I was gone over the weekend, that is going to be going up after this weekly wrap up, because I mean the month of July starts on Friday. So this last book I will be talking about, I read just recently, and I will have more to say about it in my weekly wrap up. So let's go ahead and start. The first book that I had to have, and this was really tough because obviously I have the 2 6-star books in here, but I had 11 5-star books. Now, quite a few of those were rereads that I was doing for my Patreon books, but there was also quite a few new 5-star books, which is awesome. And it was very difficult to pick. But a series that I finished right at the beginning of the month was The Sons of the Survivalists by Cherise Sinclair. And my favorite one in the series was Soar High, which this is the 4th book in the series. You really do need to read this series in order. It's a build upon series. But this book was about Kit, who in the book right before this one, she actually gets rescued from a cult that she's been pulled into. One second, I'm gonna have to fix the lighting. Give me 1 second. It's literally been cloudy all morning, so I have my window open. And then the sun starts to come and send streaks across. So we may still have some problems with that. But anyway, and she has a son, and she had reached out to her best friend to ask for help, not for herself, but to get her son out of this cult. And in previous books, we've seen this band of brothers. They're all adopted brothers, and they all have like different traumas in their past and things that have happened. But Hawk, who is a pilot and has been in the military and has had a very rough childhood, just like all of them, he kind of bonds with the little boy while the mother is like healing, because they do rescue her from this cult, as I said. And this kid ends up like attaching to Hawk and like won't be away from him. And that's very strange for Hawk because he has a scar on his face. They put a tiny little scar on this cover, but he is pretty scarred and he's very grumpy and gruff, but this kid just latches onto him. And so it really is a story of healing for both Kit and Hawk. And once their sexual relationship starts to develop, Hawk is very willing and excited to take things slowly for her and help her to feel comfortable with him, and it's really beautiful. So this one was a 5-star read for me. As I said, it was only like a 2 on my spice scale, but this series, I was so in love with it. I love small town. I love found family. This whole town is a found family, and the audiobooks for these were excellent. I really, really liked it. So there was trigger warnings for cult violence and PTSD, also remembering of the assaults that the heroine has survived, but nothing overly graphic with it, but very powerful. Then we have a book that I am sure y'all have been excited for, possibly. I know I was salivating for this book, and that is Give Me More by Sarah Kate. This was a 6-star book for me. I have gushed about this book, but I also am being kind of like keeping it behind the scenes a little bit because I want people to experience it. But this is an MMF, and it is the best one I've ever read. Like, it is done the best for how the subject comes up, how they start to go into it, and actually how the two heroes become, make it from an MFM to an MMF, which if you don't know, you can tell what kind of relationship are happening within a menage based on like where the F sits. So if it goes MFM, it means that the two men are sharing the women, but if it's an MMF, it means everybody shares everybody, okay? Just in case you know, there is a difference when you see those letters when explaining a relationship. So this one, there's a married couple called Hunter and Isabel, and they've been together and married. They've been together for 10 years, and Drake has always been Hunter's best friend, and he's become like best friends with Isabel too. They are like always together, and they actually work together too, because Hunter is part owner of the Salacious Players Club, which is a BDSM/sex club, and he needs to go on a like road trip to check out other sex clubs and find out if there are any new like rooms or acts or training that they want to add to theirs. And Drake is a builder, so he goes with two. Like he does an architect. That's the word. And so they end up on this road trip together. And while they're on this trip, Hunter broaches the subject of if Drake would fuck Isabel in front of him. And this really starts to open, I wouldn't want to call it a can of worms, but it could be Pandora's box, maybe is what we call it. Because Drake is bisexual, openly bisexual, and he is very much attracted to Hunter, his best friend, and he's always kept that hidden, not only because he knows his friend is from a very homophobic past, but also because he would never want to ruin his friendship, and he does love Isabel and cares about all of them. And Isabel is wondering why her husband wants to share her with someone. So all those things are there. And it feels like it's such a mess that everything would be insurmountable. But the way Sarah Kate has all of those questions come up and shows us how we deal with them and has the characters working through it, it was absolutely beautiful. And what surprised me was actually Hunter's journey and him coming to accept that he also has feelings for his friend and trying to fight some of that internalized like homophobia that he has based on where he grew up. Because he does not judge Drake for who he wants to fuck, but he's very like judgmental of himself when he starts to have feelings for his best friend. So it's very interesting. And I just, like I said, I've never read an MMF that approached it this way and that was so moving and that I like cried. Like this was not just about the sex at all. And I've said this in quite a few videos I've mentioned this book so far, is that I think it's a disservice to this book that only the sexy quotes are put on the Instagram pictures, because this book was a beautiful book for Pride Month. And I'll say that again and again because it was this very like subtle but forceful at the same time, like for Hunter having to really like, I'm asking this of my loved ones to give me something, but what am I giving as well? You know, it's gorgeous. It was wonderful. Then we have A Matter of Temptation by Stacey Reed. This book just came out. I had an arc for this book, and Stacey Reed never lets me down, so I was very excited to read it. I have even more of her books to read still, but this one made me so happy. So this one I believe is going to be a standalone book. I haven't seen that it's connected with the series yet, so we'll have to see. But this book is about Miss Wilhelmina Crawford and about Simon Lufton, who's the Earl of Chiswick, or Creswick, I don't know how we say it. I think it's Chiswick. And her brother, I believe it's her twin brother, gets in trouble playing cards, and he actually challenges the Earl to a duel to like save his own face, which was really dumb. And he ends up challenging him to swords because he's not as good of a shot as the Earl, so he does swords. And Mina, along with her housekeeper, they actually like, the housekeeper like drugs her brother. And then Wilhelmina actually dresses as a boy and goes to duel the Earl because she's actually a better fighter than her brother. And she wins. And the Earl actually can tell that she's a woman. And he decides that he really likes her fire, he likes her spark, and he asks her to work with him, to be his secretary, because he has a bill that he's been trying to champion for years and secure the vote for England's most vulnerable constituents. And Mina is just an incredible temptation to him. And so he gets her to work with him, but then because she lives so far away, he's like, well, you need to live with me because it takes you so long to get here every day. It's prohibitive of our work together. So she ends up moving in with him. So this is like forced proximity. And she's an incredible temptation to him. Now, Mina actually has kind of a checkered past. She was party to a failed elopement when she was young, and so she's been kind of like shamed already, and so it's definitely not helpful for her to now be living with this Earl and working with him. But she's very interested in doing it, and she also could use the money for her family, so she agrees to do it. And this book, the chemistry between the two of them, the subtle, and I'm saying that, this subtle feminism in this book made me smile. And it's very rare that happens, because I've said it again and again, I am a feminist, but the way that historical romances coming out today try to be feminist kind of makes me want to gag, because they like are the kind of feminism that like makes people roll their eyes and is like, well, that's not going to get us anywhere. And whatever, people can have their opinion about how they want. I know those books work for a lot of people because it's exciting to see, but Simon is a feminist, okay? This Earl is a feminist without it ever having to be said, without him having to crow about it, without him, you know, making demands like, look at me, look what I'm doing for women, I'm so great. Like, the law that he's trying to get passed and the way that he treats Mina as an equal and the way that once they begin a sexual relationship, how he, just wants to give her everything. He is a feminist, and it was beautiful because I didn't feel preached at, but I still felt like I got a message at the end of this book. And Stacey Reid's able to do it, y'all. Stacey Reid's able to do it, and I don't think that everybody can. And I'm not like throwing shade at other authors, but I'm also saying that this, along with like a Daring Pursuit, are two of my favorite historical romances that have come out this year that I've actually liked, because I've really struggled with those. So this was fantastic. It was 5-star read for me. This was a 3 on the spice scale. Also, Simon is so swoony. He's that kind of, you know, he's that kind of hero where he's like, I'm not going to fall in love with you. This is just going to be sex. I'm going to take care of you, but like, it's just going to be sex. And then he's like making sure she has the ice cream that she wants and making her feel pretty. And he's all like, oh, I'm not feeling feelings, but he totally is. And I love that. All right, and now I don't have my physical copy of this one yet. It's not supposed to get here till tomorrow, which is frustrating. But I also loved Stolen by a Sinner by Michelle Hurd. This is book 3 in her series. You can read these books as standalones. You absolutely can. This is my favorite by far. The last one I gave 5 stars. The first one I gave 3 stars. But this one is a 6-star book for me. This is about Laura and Gabriel. This is a Polish mafia. Each one of these books is about a different head of a different mafia. So that's why you could read these as standalones. You honestly could. The other characters are barely mentioned in this. And I've had quite a few people agree with me that they don't like the first book, but love the second and third book. So if you feel like you'll want to plow through all of them, you absolutely can. Or you could trust me and just jump to the second or the third book. Okay? So Laura and Gabriel, and this book starts with Laura is a prisoner, basically a domestic slave for the Polish mafia. Yeah, for the Polish mafia. And her mother was a slave before her. And when she was like 12 years old, I think, her mother was ill and then she disappeared. And so she believes that her owner / boss had killed her mother. That's what she believes. And so she's forced to like take over her mother's work. So this is also kind of a like Cinderella retelling in the loosest sense of the word. But if you love Cinderella, you will definitely pick up on the aspects of it as we go, because there are a lot of them. She calls Gabriel her prince later on too, even though he's a very bloody one. But Laura ends up, so it's like 10 years later this takes place, she ends up in the way when Gabriel storms the compound to try to kill this head of the mafia, because they're at war. And Laura actually ends up getting shot in this situation. And Gabriel is so furious that this woman basically like walked in his way. But she didn't know what was happening. But he thinks that because she is a, maid, she's a slave, but a maid in this household, that she must know some of her like boss's secrets. And so he takes her to his home. He has her like wounds healed, but then he's going to like get information out of her. When it becomes clear that she has no loyalty to this man, she absolutely hated him, and she shares everything she knew, which is nothing because the man didn't tell her anything. He's doesn't know what to do with her now, because he's like, I can't let her go because she knows where I am, but I also don't want her here. But she begs to be his maid, and he agrees because he has a housekeeper who could use the help, and so he agrees, and he gives her a room, and he's going to pay her, and her mind is blown because he gives her this room that, like, it's like a regular size room with a bathroom, and she's like, did you accidentally bring me to, like, one of the household rooms? And he's like, no, this is servants' quarters, like, here you go. And he's like, what's your bank account? I need to be able to pay you monthly. And she's like, I don't have any money, like, I don't have a bank account. And he's literally just like, and then his household basically falls in love with her. So the housekeeper falls in love with her, his, like, guards fall in love with her, his grandmother who lives there falls in love with her. And he's very strict in the beginning because he still doesn't trust her. He thinks she very much could be a spy, but she just wins him over bit by bit. And this is a big age gap one. He is 36 and she's 22. All of these are age gap in this series, but I don't know, it's just beautiful. And as he starts to have feelings for her, his whole house really wants her to, like, be with him, and there's, like, a ball that happens, and there's, like, it was so good. Like, it was so good. I don't want to spoil anything for this book, but this one is also a slow burn. I think Michelle Hurd does a really great slow burn in this series because there's a lot of trauma our heroine had been through. She actually had not been raped by this man. She was still a virgin, miracle, but she was abused. Like, there are just as bad of things that can happen to you. Like, she had been whipped and beaten. She'd had her arm broken. You know, she believed her mother was killed. Like, there are worse things. Well, like, there are just as bad of things that can happen to you as rape. So there definitely were still trigger warnings for that. Like, there's a pretty brutal beating that we see her go through right at the beginning of the book. But loved it. The slow burn was beautiful. By the time they're together, it's just like your gut is just like, ooh. So this was a 6-star book, and it was a 3 on the spice scale, but, like, it's a slow burn to get to that. So the last book that I want to talk about, and like I said, it was very hard to pick. And I also want to mention the Reynolds Restoration series, which, if you've watched any of my videos I put out in the last week, I mentioned that series in all of them. So that's why I was like, okay, I guess I don't have to put it on this list. But I was obsessed with this whole series. There's 3 books out in this series. They were small town romance, and I loved them. So I just want to give them an honorable mention. The first one was 5 stars, and then the other 2 were 4.5, 4 stars, but loved it. But the last book I want to mention, as I shared earlier, I just read this one the other day, so I haven't even talked about it yet anywhere, but I read the newest release by Minerva Spencer / SM La Violette, and that is Phoebe. This book is another book that's one of my favorite historicals that's come out this year. I have talked about Minerva Spencer so many times on this channel, and this is the beginning of a new series that these will all be, I think, ebook, you know, like, these ones are her indie releases. And this one is about a family of, there are 5 daughters and 1 son. The son is the youngest, and this family is now kind of genteel poverty because the father has wasted away, like, he had his family money he'd wasted away, and then his wife's money that he'd wasted away, and now he has 5 daughters, and none of them are married, and they're all just kind of, like, slowly losing everything that they have. And so we have Phoebe, who is the, like, second youngest daughter. So she's 20 years old, and she has a younger sister and a younger brother and 3 older sisters. And her family, to, you know, make some money and to also try to keep their family home from falling apart, I think it's called Queensboro is the name of their family home. The father is going to rent out this home and then hope that by the time his son, who at the time he's only 15, by the time he inherits, that he will still have a house to inherit. We'll see. And then we have our hero, whose name is Paul, and he is, I believe, based on what they explain, I think he's like 34, 36 years old, and he has a bastard daughter named Lucy, and his ex-mistress, who he is going to be bringing to live in this house with him, which he is renting, and going to fix it up because he's actually an architect and a businessman. And his family is new money that he has worked hard. Like, think of him kind of like a Mr. Thornton, but a little more genteel than Mr. Thornton. But that's kind of thing. He's very much in industry. He has like, he's richer than the Prince Regent type of man. And people very much like begrudge his money type of thing, right? That kind of guy. And he moves into this home and he's going to be looking for a wife, but he's very blunt about the fact that his daughter is going to be living with him, and also his ex-mistress, who they have not been together romantically in a very long time, but she's sick. She's dying of consumption, and he refuses to make her die alone because he cares for her. Even though there's nothing romantic between them anymore, he cares for her, and he loves his daughter, and he is not going to make them hide away. So he puts that foot forward, and it definitely gets him, off on the wrong foot with the people in the area. But he has money, and so they're going to smile at him and throw their daughters at him, even though they would love to snub him. And he gets on the wrong foot with Phoebe when he just bluntly says that his daughter's going to be living there. He doesn't owe these people an explanation, but he's like, my daughter will be living with me. And they're like, oh, we're so sorry, because they assume he's a widow if he has a daughter. And he's like, I'm not a widow. I actually have my ex-mistress is living with me. And they're all like, and Phoebe, being 20 years old, is very indignant about this, mostly about his attitude and the fact that he would be so disrespectful about it. Again, she's 20. She doesn't know a lot. But she knows that her mother is going to try to make one of her older sisters marry this guy. And so, and he basically says that he will. He goes to town, he goes to London, and her sisters are staying in London. And just to literally dig it to the family, he takes these one of the older sisters out for a ride, and Phoebe hears about this. And so when he comes back to town, he had actually overheard her say that he was this this uncouth, barbarian basically. And he thinks that's funny, but he also wants to stick it to her. So he's like, I will marry one of her sisters just to mess with her. So, sorry I'm taking too long to explain this, but I loved this book. So Phoebe goes to his home unaccompanied, and she begs him not to marry her sister. She's like, my sisters are too good. They will marry you to save the rest of us, and I'm asking you not to do that just because I said what I said. And he's so intrigued by her and extremely attracted to her. Oh, that's the sexual chemistry in this book. And he asks her, okay, I won't marry any of your sisters on one condition. And I'm sure you can guess what it is. The condition that you marry me instead. So she stops him from making one of her sisters make the sacrifice, and she makes the sacrifice instead. And Phoebe and Paul get married, and then we have our adventure. Again, the sexual chemistry is amazing. Minerva Spencer writes great steam. She doesn't actually write a lot of virgins in her books. That's not usually something that Minerva Spencer does. This one does have a virgin heroine, but one of the hottest wedding night scenes with a virgin I've read in a historical novel. The hero is so patient and so you are going to be so ready for this. We're making it happen. It's so good. It's so good. And I love how Phoebe she can't help but be attracted to him. So this book does have a few misunderstandings, but number one, the hero kind of purposely makes some of those misunderstandings happen because there are secrets that he's trying to keep. There are other people involved besides himself, and our heroine is young. But what I loved and what makes this work over some other books that have misunderstandings for me is that when the heroine or the hero knows that they've jumped to a conclusion and they're kind of ashamed that they did, they apologize. And our heroine does that so well. She learns so much. She knows that she's been sheltered. She knows her family is stuck up. And when she starts to learn things as she finds them out, she can swallow her pride, which is very difficult because the hero teases her about it the whole way through, and she will apologize for things that she's done wrong. And I love that in a heroine. And there are times where the hero has to do it too. And I just love that. I love it because we all jump to conclusions. That is, miscommunication is a thing in romance. But what I love is when we apologize for it, or when we then discuss it and make it work. And this book did that for me. So, all right, there you go. Those are my stats for the month of June, along with my favorite books that I've read. Let me know if you're interested in reading any of these. I would love to share them with you. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you've liked this video. Leave a comment for me. Those are all very important because I do this full time and I need all the help you can give me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.